The union budget for the upcoming financial year has just been presented. The impressions that come soon after the budget are, of course, necessarily very quick thoughts on what has been presented and not the result of a careful study of numbers, which is to come. But I'd like to make 3 quick points in relation to this budget. One, on what one can discern about the overall vision of the government from the budget announcements. 2, something about capital expenditure, which has been always a big focus of this government. And 3, some remarks on the revenue side. Coming to the vision, it's very interesting, and several subsequent budgets have shown the government's interest in smaller businesses, MSMEs, traditional industries, artisans, tourism. There's a kind of a set of ideas emerging, it looks like, which emphasize, if you will, a kind of an indigenous approach, which would be quite in keeping with the government's Atmanirbhar and other kind of ideas. Some of these are exciting ideas, and even this budget has some of these ways of promoting traditional industry, which tends to be employment intensive, and also tied to the cultural identities of various parts of the country. So there are a few such things in there. And if well done, well funded, well executed, and supported, there's a huge potential in these, both from an employment and a growth point of view. Which brings me to the second point, which is, do we really do that? Do we follow through on such visions? And here's where the capital expenditure part comes in. It's a welcome move to increase capital expenditures, of course, because there are multiplier effects. Infrastructure is always a key part of the growth story. But what kind or what form does it take really matters. So what I mean by that is, we are often attracted to large projects, ports, airports, highways, and so forth when we talk of capital expenditure. But really, connecting back to my first point, what matters for small businesses and local businesses and economies is investment in small town infrastructure. So capital infrastructure, but at a very local level, in the tier 2, tier 3 towns, even in villages and so on. Here, if you create enough capacity, enough infrastructure, then you're alleviating supply-side bottlenecks, you're helping businesses grow, which are part of that kind of cultural story that I talked about in the first point. And the employment impacts also of this kind of local asset generation are likely to be higher than large projects. And I think here's where we consistently fail to really put money where our mouth is. The final point is on revenue. Many people will, of course, say many things about raising the exemption limit on personal income tax and the resulting shift towards indirect taxes. I just want to point out a broader thing here, which is that with every increase in this exemption limit, the tax base, the direct tax base, narrows. So now if you say 7 lakhs a year, that's, you're talking about a very small part of the income distribution of India. The top 5 or 4% really are now going to be in the direct tax paying bracket. There can be many consequences to talk about of this, but I want to focus on one social consequence, which is that we know from history that creating a direct income tax paying public is a very important part of constructing a public consciousness, of contributing to public goods, right? And having a stake in the country and the goods that we create together. It's not that we don't pay taxes. Of course, everybody pays taxes through indirect taxes, but there's a special status to direct income taxes. And by making it narrower and narrower, we are making it harder and harder for us to create that public consciousness. And I fear that this, at some point, this is going to be bad for us. There can be rationales, of course, and you can say that people are hurting from COVID. We want to give them relief. These are not bad rationales, but there is another side here to be considered from a broader historical and social perspective. So these 3 things, I think, for me, would be the main takeaways. The vision that the government displays, the consistency of it, the capital expenditure side, are we really doing what we should be doing with capital expenditures? And on revenue, should we be thinking about the wider consequences of these kind of revenue restructuring?